right here in the water.
Wow.
Thank you. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Chapman. I'm 92 years old, and I was in the Navy for 23 years. I've gone through Pearl Harbor, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. I got out of the Navy in 1983. So I joined the Navy when I was 18 years old, and went to Hawaii a year before the attack to Pearl Harbor. I was assigned to the West Virginia. All the battleships were in, I can't think where they're at. What's around, they weren't in San Diego, they were around San Pedro there. And there was 8 of us there. And President Roosevelt came aboard the West Virginia. And he could not walk or anything. When he came alongside, they had to put him in a boatswain chair and haul him up to the quarterdeck. Then they brought his chair up. Then we lined up all in the quarterdeck there, and he rolled his chair by all of us and told us we were going to go to Hawaii, but there was some trouble coming up. We were not at war at that time. I think there was war with Germany and England, but they were worried that we'd be brought into it at that time. So I was out there for a year before the Pearl Harbor. While I was there, I was only an apprentice seaman, but I had a lifeguard certificate, and I was only making $21 a month. That wasn't even enough to even go ashore. So I went over to the Royal Hawaiian, and I showed him my lifeguard certificate. I told him I wanted to be a lifeguard there. They said we had been looking for a young lifeguard to take care of the children here. All the movie stars that visit the Royal Hawaiian had children, and there was nobody to take care of them during when they're swimming. So my job was to oversee all these children, keep them out of the deep end of the pool, and they had a little shallow end there where they could play in. But if I was making $2 an hour, I was making more money as a lifeguard in the Navy. So I did that for about a year, and this did on my off time, off the ship, when all the battleships had to go around the Hawaiian Islands. There was four went out for 2 weeks, and we circled all the islands for 2 weeks, had gun practices, and went through all kind of exercises out there. And we come in and for 2 weeks, and we'd enjoy 2 weeks in Hawaii. So those 2 weeks, whenever time off, I would go over to the Royal Hawaiian and do my lifeguard duty. And I met many Hollywood stars there. It was amazing. I had a tattoo on my arm, but I always had to put a sweatshirt on because they didn't let them know that I had a sailor as a lifeguard on the Royal Hawaiian. So for that year's time, we got word that the West Virginia and the Tennessee and the California were going to go back to the States for getting new radars and new guns. So the officers on the West Virginia had sent their wives back by planes, and come to find out that we weren't going to go back. Friday night, 3 battleships came into Pearl Harbor to replace us, and we had taken on board 50 nurses on the West Virginia. They had to make a special place for them in the officers' dining room, and they were going to stay there, and we were taking them back to the States. There was a party that Saturday night, and they had all the bands over on the party, and they were fighting for the best band in all of Pearl Harbor's battleships, and the West Virginia won the prize. So, well, that night they had reveille about 1 o'clock in the morning, and we had to transfer all these nurses to one of these battleships. Roosevelt didn't want those battleships there. He took them out the next morning and took the nurses with him, and the West Virginia, the Tennessee, and the California were still sitting in Pearl Harbor. So I had a job at the Royal Hawaiian, and I told him that I was going to leave, and I turned my keys in. So Sunday morning, since we weren't going back, I was going to go back over, make sure I got my job back again. Well, I didn't get over there because we had a torpedo that hit us right in the bow and knocked me right on my butt here. I was holding whites, and I said, well, I'm not going to go ashore today, it looks like. So we all had to go to general quarters, and my station was on the third deck underneath number 3 turret. When I was going down there, we had taken already 4 torpedoes, and we had a total of 9 torpedoes in us. Is that picture here? There's a picture showing all the hits on the West Virginia. Is that picture? It's on the back side. Close it up. Close it up.
There we go. Yes, sir.
All these spots are 9 torpedoes that hit the West Virginia, and we were taking. All the water was coming in on clear on down the third deck. So I got down there. The water was already up to my waist, and I wasn't supposed to be on the phones because the chief warrant officer of our division did not report to the station. I think he was ashore that night. The officers always had overnight leave, but the enlisted men, you couldn't have overnight leave unless you were married and be ashore. So these officers on the West Virginia had already sent all their wives back to the States, so I guess that's where they stayed because they never came back. Anyway, as I went down to my third deck, I was on the number 3 turret, and the water was to my waist, and the phone man wasn't down there, so they had a first-class quartermaster, carpenter's mate down there, told me to take the phones. I was only a third-class ship fitter, so I took the phones, and I climbed up into a little pocket where the ammunition goes up to number 3 turret, so I could get my phone out of the water. So I was up there, the water was rising in very fast. It was already up to my shoulders, and I was at the top there. And before long, it was we were hanging on the beams, and all the hatches were closed and condition X-ray. You could not open any hatch unless the commanding officer allowed you to do so. So I thought, well, I think we're going to die down here, because there was just enough air to keep the water from rising anymore. So the next word came down, counterflood, all the valves on the starboard side, because the ship was 45 degrees over, and we were pulling the Tennessee over, so their guns could not fire. So the captain told in on the Tennessee to cut all the lines on the West Virginia. And when she did, we even went further, deeper down in the water. And so I reported the flood valves were open in our area there. And about 10 minutes later, the word came down. There was no lights. The only lights we had was on the battle engines that were on the bulkheads. And they illuminated the water down below there. So most of them were saying their prayers. And my mother told me when I joined the Navy to always say that the Lord is my shepherd. That's Psalms 23. And I had to learn that by heart when I was about 10 years old. And I've always remembered it. And she said, if you're ever in trouble, you say this prayer and you'll be saved. So as they were saying their prayers, I was saying the Lord's Prayer down there. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. About that time, a word came over the phones, take charge. And I knew Jimmy Lyons, he was down at the Denver Control Center. I said, Jim, what do you mean take charge? I said, well, I heard to take charge. And Jim says, John, you know what to do. Jim and I were buddies. We used to work out together, weightlifting, hand balancing. So I told him, if you listen to me, I'll get you out of here. I used to weigh all the fire extinguishers on the ship every month. There was 500 of them. So I knew every space on that ship and how to get in and out of them. So I told him, if you listen to me, I'll get you out of here. I says, I know I'm only 19, but I know the ship and I can get you out of here. So I told the men, take those lights off the bulkhead because we're going to need them to get through the ship because the ship was blacked out. The only thing we had was sound power phones. So I called next door and I asked them how high the water was in that space, and they said it's just above the hatch. There's a submarine hatch down on the third deck. They said it's just above it. I said,